Oh, are you serious? So I'm just edit that. Just stay. Thank Lord. All right. Everyone has something that absolutely shakes them to the core. For some, it's the supernatural. For others, it's the unknown. But for me, it's one word. Let me explain. Since freshman year of high school, a singular word has haunted me. It's not a slur, or not at least to the majority of people. The word commonly is used within most of society. It's a short but simple word consisting of 4 letters, CANT. Let me tell you about it. My name is Luis Alfredo Estrella, and I've been a student athlete for the majority of my life. I've experienced much during my academic career across 8 different high schools and 5 different teams. Most of the teams I was part of did not see much success, where a singular win was seen as a masterful accomplishment. This taught me to value every single game we won. Only recently have I actually seen success, which came in my senior year of the football season at an entirely new school. Despite that, my greatest moments came from my freshman year, where we only won 1 game. This past year, I was blessed with the opportunity to become the athletic trainer assistant for my high school as part of my extended learning opportunity. This was truly the first time in my life that I was able to take a step back and look at how teams handled loss and success. What I've learned so far is the attitude a coach and his team has can and will affect the way they play their games. Once that mentality is in the air, they tend to lose that growth mindset. Throughout my life, I noticed how certain players or teams would go into games with the mentality that they were going to lose, that they wouldn't be able to compete, and in every game they failed to meet their own standards. These people on their teams had adopted a fixed mindset, and it was hard to get rid of. Most often than not, it carried out for the rest of the season. My question for all of you is, how do you ever expect to win if you don't have faith in yourself, your coaches, or your fellow teammates? Before I share the horrors that one word has brought upon me, let me share with you this quote to keep in the back of your mind as I tell my tale. Losing is only temporary and not all-encompassing. You must simply study from it, learn from it, and try hard not to lose the same way again. Then you must have the self-control to forget about it. That quote comes from John Wooden. He was the men's basketball coach at UCLA, where he managed to win 10 championships. See, my coach that freshman year was rebuilding a culture that had come accustomed to losing, numb to the feeling of disappointment, and had gotten used to letting themselves down, but he had garnered the skills to change the culture of the school's program. What separated him from any other coach I had was the level of belief and his dedication to learn about every single athlete on a more personal level. He couldn't have accomplished this without the ability to accept and learn from the losses that occurred throughout the seasons. He always had a steadfast attitude and approached every scenario with the most optimistic angle a coach could have, but not everyone can or knows how to handle loss, which is important for everyone involved in sports to understand. I certainly didn't. I was lucky to have a coach who changed my life. He was a coach who had a rule that changed the way I think forever. Whether I was in the weight room or in the classroom, we could never utter the CANT word. Even merely uttering that word was the worst thing we could do in front of that man, because as soon as we did, we had to do 100 push-ups on the spot, no matter what we were doing. He did this because he believed it would restrict your mind. By saying you can't do something, how could you ever achieve it? It just takes time, dedication, and patience. Everything is possible if you put your mind, body, and soul into it. Before I had this understanding, I struggled to reach expectations. Anytime things got rough, I used to run away, shift my mind onto something else. The sense of conflict avoidance has been absent since I learned that life lesson from my coach. Even to this day, I refuse to say that word, no matter how hard things get. As a matter of fact, I've limited that word from my vocabulary entirely, and I try to limit my peers from saying it as well. See, according to Carol Dweck, there are 2 main mindsets that we can navigate life with: growth and fixed mindsets. She believes that having a growth mindset is essential for success, as did my coach. Dr. Dweck is an American psychologist out of Yale who specializes in figuring out how people foster success and also how to avoid shortcomings. But not limiting yourself by seeing CANT, you automatically put yourself in a growth mindset, which puts you in a better position to be able to embrace challenges, persist when faced with setbacks, learn from criticism, and see the amount of effort as a way to get better rather than something that is fruitless. You can apply this way of thinking no matter what you decide to do with your life. By forcing yourself to see all the possibilities of achieving a goal or dream, you can never miss out on the opportunity to complete them. It helps to set realistic goals, as nothing good can come from chasing the impossible. As long as you're reasonable and understand your own limitations, you will always set yourself up for some sort of success. To tie to this quote that sits idly behind me, losing is only temporary, so why not go that extra mile? Why not go after the new PR? Why not spend extra time getting help in an assignment? The art of losing is, in my opinion, one of the best things that can happen to an individual because it forces us to learn from it and do our best to avoid the same outcomes. To understand the effects of loss, you have to be familiar with the 5 stages of grief, which consists of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, all according to Swiss-American psychiatrist Kubler-Ross. Even adopting this mentality for one game can have chronic consequences, not just in the sport you play, but it can affect the life you live. I was never aware of this fact as an athlete. I was always told from a young age that whatever happens in the game stays in the game, and was never warned about the mental aspect of playing organized sports. Just last year, I found myself at a stuck point, where my football season didn't turn out the way I wanted to, and I've been placed within a toxic environment due to the coaches on the staff. Stuck points are what make dealing with grief so hard, because it's not easy just to forget about things that have happened in the past. It just creates a mental cycle where certain moments or thoughts just replay in the back of your mind continuously, which then creates a cumulative grief. This cumulative grief that I adopted affected the rest of my academic year, impacting my grades, social life, and overall health. Not only did this mentality affect me, but it became contagious, and soon enough, those around me had contracted it as well. In hindsight, I wish I was aware of the 5 stages of grief, as it would have been able to help me cope with the stages more effectively. The one thing about people is that everybody processes information in their own unique way. In hindsight, I wish I was aware of the 5 stages of grief, as it would have been able to help me cope with the stages more effectively. The one thing about people is that everybody processes information in their own unique way. As someone who recently adopted a growth mindset, let me tell you what the 5 stages of grief were like for me and how they impacted me. Maybe some of you can relate to some of the difficulties I went through during these stages. Stage number 1 was denial. At first, I couldn't believe the season was over. I'd watched hours of film refusing to believe that my junior year had been taken away from me. I couldn't believe that the season I had nonstop fantasized about had failed to live up to my own expectations. Stage 2, anger. Soon after the season had reached its end, I had this burning sensation within my spirit. I despised the coaches, hated my teammates for not saying what had transpired, and was disgusted in myself for not having more control over what had happened. This anger had transpired throughout the whole year. Stage 3, bargaining. I then reached a point where my anger finally started to settle, but then came all of the what if scenarios. What if I worked out harder? What if I talked to the coach differently? What if I stuck up for myself? Did I try hard enough? All these different scenarios just kept bringing me back to the same spot and didn't allow my brain to catch rest. In the medical sense, the stuck points are like scabs. The more you pick at it, the worse it gets. The best course to take is to let it heal over time naturally. Stage number 4, depression. All that anger and bargaining that I'd accumulated over the year finally bubbled over and sent my mental health into a deep depression. I couldn't get away from the mindset of the previous season, of the loss, of the disappointment, and for whatever reason, I kept cycling back, kept going back to that stuck point, and that truly affected not only myself, but my loved ones around me. I couldn't interact with my teammates, my classmates, even my teachers simply because of how in my own head I was about the whole ordeal. The last and final stage, acceptance. This last stage was probably the hardest one that I had to go through. I couldn't get myself to admit the season was over, that my opportunity for the year had ceased, and I was left to face reality. And the scariest part of going through that experience was the what now question that just lingered in the back of my head every single day that I was walking alone. I wish I never took so long to get to the stage of acceptance, because it just dragged this grief that I had over myself, and it took a toll on my body, my family, and my loved ones. If I could go back and change one thing about last year, it wouldn't even be the actual season itself. It would be how I handled the aftermath. That grief period that I went through lasted the whole academic school year. Living with that fixed mindset really had a chronic effects on my life, but luckily during spring break, I was able to have a sit-down conversation with my coach. It was only then that I realized my faults when dealing with the endured pain. He told me to look at what I learned from my experience rather than to dwell within the confines of the past that I could not change. What good was I doing for myself by not having a growth mindset and finding some sort of lesson from it? Since that year, I've made his teachings and my own experience into a lifestyle where I no longer limit myself, and I've lived a healthier, more fruitful life because of it. It has now made me realize that I want to be able to change the lives of the next generation in hopes to instill a positive growth mindset that no other kid has to go through what I went through that year. Sports as a whole can not only significantly impact your overall physical health, but can help one grow as an individual through the life lessons and team bonding that can't be replicated really anywhere else. As a current athlete and a future coach, I advise you all to do the same. Whenever times get rough, just know there's always an opportunity to learn and grow from it, no matter the case. To go back to my CANT story that I used to see as simply just a punishment, but now I know it's one of the greatest lessons I could ever have been taught. Even 10 years down the line from now, I'll still proceed to remember my coach's valuable lessons, as each one has helped me grow and mature as a man as I take the next step into my professional career. One lesson that I hope everyone can take away from this speech is to live in the present. Don't focus too much on the future, especially don't focus too much on the past. There's no point in dwelling on the past because the past is uncontrollable. What you can control and what you can change is the mentality and well-being that you have now. Now, it's important to understand that setting goals and striving to achieve them is mentally draining, as setbacks are inevitable. But what separates those who rise and those who stay is their ability to manage that mental exhaustion. What matters now is what you can take away from any type of challenges and difficulties that you may come across in your life. And just know that as long as you come to terms with anything that could happen, you could always put yourself in a position to be able to grow and from it, become a better overall person.
What happened to your finger? Sorry, I started coughing.
There was like a splint, and it went underneath my nail.
Ooh.
I think I held it together though. Let me see how long this was.